I just bought this brand new 2025 Mustang GTD, and I'm so excited to give you a full walk around of this vehicle with an owner's perspective. Because quite frankly, there's a lot about this car that most people will never fully understand unless you watch this video. So what's up guys, Mitchell Watts with TC Customs, and I wanna first start off by saying thank you to every single one of you guys that watch our videos, because if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't have the opportunity to play with cool cars like this. So I'm so thankful. There's gonna be a lot of awesome content on this car. It's not gonna be a garage queen, and I'm so excited to share it with the world, and especially with you specifically. So with that being said, what do we have here? 2025 Mustang GTD. How does the Mustang GTD start life? Well, it starts out like a body in white is what most people call it, because at the end of the day, a body in white is basically Ford Motor Company stamping out the frame of the vehicle, or the actual body of the vehicle, and they would take it off the assembly line and they would ship it off to a race shop to have it customized. But in this case, it actually starts out as a body in black. I'm going to show you why here in just a second, but it's a very neat little thing. But from there, really you only have a couple pieces of metal all across the whole vehicle. You have the structure here, and you also have the door is also metal. Why? Because Ford's already done the research and development for the door. You've got the crash test ratings for the door. All that kind of stuff is already factored in. There's no reason to redo that. Now I know what you're probably thinking about. Well, what about the Mustang GTD Liquid Carbon Series? It's got a carbon fiber door. Well, it actually has a metal door, but it's reskinned on the outside with carbon fiber, so that way the whole car looks like carbon fiber. But what we're dealing with here is a 2025 Mustang GTD Carbon Series. And yes, I'm gonna show you what we paid for this stupid thing, because it's a lot of money. That's coming later on the video, so don't go anywhere. But we have an upgraded version. So all the Mustang GTDs start life out as a normal Mustang GTD. Now what we did is we added the Carbon Series. What is the Carbon Series? What that does is it gives you exposed carbon fiber on the hood, on the front bumper, the chin splitter, and it also gives you exposed carbon fiber on the roof, because it's also carbon fiber, and then it also gives you exposed carbon fiber on the tech deck in the rear. More on that in just a second. But basically what happens is that Multimatic, when they get the car, they come in, they start building this vehicle, and they're laying out all this hand-built carbon fiber stuff for this car, and they got to lay it out in a very specific pattern, so that way all of the carbon fiber weave is coming together at the perfect spot. You'll notice that the chevron is what Ford calls this. The chevron, where this weave meets this weave, is perfect all the way down. Now, a fun fact for you, you can actually take this blue center stripe and delete it. Jay Leno actually did that on his car. They call that the exposed chevron. And basically what that boils down to is Ford Motor Company charges you an obscene amount of money to not have paint in that center stripe. Why is that? Because it requires a lot more manual labor to make sure that the chevron, that V, meets up all the way down the vehicle, whereas our Carbon Series just needs to meet on a couple of smaller spots. It makes it a lot easier for production, in other words. But what does all this carbon fiber get us? Well, it gets us quite a few different things. You get some design language that you can only get when it comes to carbon fiber, like the front fenders up here. Now, the whole car is not made out of carbon fiber. There's actually more that's not carbon fiber that I haven't mentioned to you yet, but all of this fender, all of the front bumper, all of that is carbon fiber. But take a look at these massive fins inside of the front fender. Most people don't know, but this is actually a plastic material. I think it's an ABS plastic material. Why in the world did they do that? Well, when you're building something with carbon fiber, you have to understand that carbon fiber is very strong, but it doesn't take impacts very well. It can shatter on you, in other words. And you'll notice that when you look straight down from up above, you can actually see the tire, motorcycle's getting it, but you can actually see the tire from up above. And that basically means you're gonna be throwing rocks all over this thing. So it's extremely important that you PPF the whole car, every single one of them. But in addition to that, you might want to do some extra PPF in this specific area, because once again, it's going to be taking a beating. But it's interesting to know carbon fiber with plastic inserts, if you will. Now, you'll also notice that running down, you know what, let me prove a point to you. Take a look at this over here. This is going to be your carbon fiber side skirt, and because we got the carbon fibers or the carbon series, you can even see all of the extra rocks it's been throwing up, even just riding around in this parking lot getting ready for this video. Ford actually says you cannot drive this car. I mean, you could do whatever you want to, but they highly recommend you don't drive the car on public roads because these Michelin Pilot Cup Sport 2 tires throw rocks so aggressively down the side of the vehicle. If you don't have PPF, you're basically going to be saying sayonara to your paint job. And so here's the other fun part about this is you can't PPF it right immediately when you get the vehicle. You actually have to let the vehicle sit for 30 days. Why is that? Well, because everything's made out of carbon fiber. You can't cook the paint in a paint shop like you would normally do on a metal vehicle. Why? Because carbon fiber doesn't like to be cooked. And so what happens is you have this paint that's painted on, and you have to let that paint degas and let the gases out of the paint for the next 30 days. And then after that 30-day window, then you can put the PPF on top of it and you won't have any issues. If not, you're gonna have issues with the PPF where, you know, the paint might be bubbling up the PPF underneath it, which is kind of a wild thought. Let's take a look at the wheels and the tires and what we've got going on up here. So I mentioned to you already, these are Michelin Pilot Cup Sport 2 tires. Specifically, they're 325 millimeters wide in the front. These things are stupid wide. I'm talking about stupid wide, but that is what allows for this car to go fast around the Nürburgring. Unfortunately, Ford does not have the record anymore. The Corvette took that, but I would argue that I don't care. Coming from a GTD owner, I don't care. I saw something that somebody said the other day. They said that the Mustang GTD will push your limits, not the other way around. There's very few people on the planet that can push this car to the limits. It's just so good, and it can handle so much that you pretty much need to be a professional race car driver to actually get everything out of this car that it can actually deliver. And speaking of that, let's talk about the brakes. We've got 6-piston Brembo brakes in the front, and this is the brand new carbon ceramic matrix brakes that they've got. Now, the Ford GT that we've got inside, that has the carbon ceramic brakes. This is the next generation, the next iteration of the brakes up here. And you've also got a really cool party trick with the suspension system. Now, the Mustang GTD has a very similar suspension system to the Ford GT, meaning that it can go up and down with the press of a button. Now let's go ahead and do that and show you what I'm talking about. See how easy that was? You just press a couple buttons on the steering wheel and the vehicle will go up. And if you do the same thing, go down into track mode, you can also have the vehicle drop in 3, 2, 1. It can also drop for you. But not only can it do that, there's also a button on the inside that will allow you to get even more clearance in the front, and it's basically a front lift gate. Now, all of this is hydraulically actuated, and let me show you what I'm talking about. All right, so here goes the front lift right now. Now, you'll notice that there is a little bit of a delay in that. It takes about 2 extra seconds. The reason is because this one does not actually have the hydraulic pump. Man, that thing looks kind of funny with it all the way up in the air like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it back down for you guys. And you'll notice it goes down a lot faster than it goes up. Why? Because it is hydraulically actuated. And that's the other reason that you cannot change the ride height on the vehicle when it is off. It stays in a normal position because when it's in track mode right now, like it is, it's basically got a suspension system with 2 springs on it. And when you go into track mode, it basically uses hydraulics to basically lock out one of those springs, and it forces it down onto the ground. That's the reason that the second that I turn this vehicle off, and I'm gonna go ahead and do that for you, you can actually see the vehicle goes right back up to the normal ride height. And that's because those hydraulics are not running because the engine is not running. So it's a fun little fact for you, just in case you did not realize that. Now, let's move on down to the side a little bit further. And once again, some of this stuff might be found on the internet. I'm gonna really get into some of the stuff that'll, whoa, I did not know that, a little bit later on in this video. Now that we're back here, I want to show you something that most people get wrong in these videos, in these reviews, if you will. So taking a look back here, a lot of people don't really understand what this is, because in the GT3 race car, this is what actually fuels the brake cooling for the rear of the vehicle. Well, in a normal vehicle, a non-track, well, I guess this is a track-focused vehicle, but it could be a daily driver. Instead, what Ford is using this for is an air curtain. So air comes in here, and it actually comes out right here to basically swirl around and have the air come out the side. What Ford realized is that having this air that was kicking off was creating basically extra turbulence, and they figured out that by taking air in here and pushing it out here actually helped with the aerodynamics, basically makes the car a whole lot faster. And so it's interesting that that is not used for the brake cooling like it is in the GT3 race car. And speaking of, this is what I'm talking about where most people get this thing wrong. I've heard so many reviewers say that they built this car for homologation purposes when it comes to racing. That they built the GTD because they had to be able to race in certain events. That's actually a false statement. Because when they first started racing the GT3 classes, this car didn't exist. The thought didn't even exist. So what did Ford do? They homologated the vehicle racing team off of the Mustang Dark Horse. And so this is purely a project based on the executives at Ford Motor Company said, that GT3, I know we've already got it homologated through the Dark Horse, but that GT3 is such a freaking cool car. I'd love to get one of those for the street. Do you think you can do it? And as you can see, they obviously can, and it is absolutely epic. Now, let's move on to the back here a little bit more. So this is what's crazy about the back end of the vehicle. Now, obviously on a track-focused vehicle like this, you're not gonna be able to rotate the tires. So the tires on the back are bigger than the ones in the front. So you basically, with these Michelin Pilot Cup Sport 2 tires, you might get 500 miles out of a set of tires, maybe 1,000 miles. All depends on your driving habits, right? If you know what I mean. But what we've got back here are a significantly wider tire in the back. So these are 345/30 ZR 20-inch tires in the back. Now, I've had a lot of people ask, well, okay, what about these wheels? What are these? Well, a fun fact, and I'm not supposed to talk about this either, but I guess I'm going to, is that Ford originally had designed and debuted this car with, hey, if you get the performance package, which this car has, you'll also get the magnesium wheels. Well, you will find out pretty quickly that we have the performance package and we do not have the magnesium wheels, which is really unfortunate. Now, I'm not going to get into the pricing on individual packages and things like that, but I will show you the window sticker once this video is closer to being over. We paid a lot of money for the performance package, and it's kind of a bummer that the pricing of that performance package really didn't go down because we're not getting the magnesium wheels. Now, I did request Ford Motor Company to send us the magnesium wheels if they come available later on, because what we've been told is there's a supplier issue with those magnesium wheels, and they basically can't get the wheels fast enough. And so my hope is that Ford sends us our wheels. They may not, they may. I really hope they do, because I think it's so cool to have a magnesium set of wheels, but these are a set of forged aluminum wheels. So once again, just kind of wanted to show you some of the things that you're not going to find in other review videos, because this is not a press car. I can say whatever I want because we own this car. Now, I also don't want to bite the hand that feeds us, because shameless plug, we are Town and Country Ford in Bessemer and Pell City, Alabama. So I'm not trying to like just take a dump on Ford, but I'm not afraid to speak the truth when the truth needs to be spoken, if that makes any sense. All right, so now let's move on to single-handedly my favorite part about the whole car. This thing is nasty. I love this gooseneck style of a rear spoiler. And there's a lot more technology in here than you ever thought possible. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, first off, this is going to be a performance package car, which means we get the upgraded DRS, drag reduction system. And so basically what it boils down to is this top part of the spoiler can actually open up to allow for more airflow all the way through, basically reducing the drag on the rear end of the vehicle. Or if I'm going to be cornering it really hard and I need to take a turn really hard, or the car seems that, oh man, Mitchell's driving a little crazy, we need a little extra downforce, it'll close that flap automatically and give me extra downforce. So what is stated is that about 185 miles an hour, this car generates over 2,000 pounds worth of downforce. That's insane that you can do that. So that basically means that, I'm not going to get up here, but that is completely rock solid. I could sit up there, all 270 pounds of myself, all 6'3" of myself could sit up here if I wanted to. Not gonna, but I could. And I just think it looks fantastic. Now, what most people don't understand is, well, this gooseneck or whatever they call it, the swan neck style or whatever they call this style of a wing, most people don't realize there's actually a functional benefit to this versus a traditional wing. What do I mean by that? Well, think about an airplane, right? How does an airplane work? Well, the air on top of the wing is moving faster than the air on the bottom of the wing rather. And that's what creates the lift. Now I want you to take that same airplane wing and I want you to flip it upside down. And so by having this neck up here on the top side, we're trying to get this air to move as fast as we possibly can, essentially sucking the vehicle down into the ground instead of creating a bunch of down force by pushing it down. Does that make sense? So once again, the air underneath it's so important for that air underneath to be extra clean because that's what's creating the most downforce, not the top side of the spoiler. It's the underside of the spoiler that creates the downforce, which I think is so stinking cool. Now, what do we have back here? We've got even more aerodynamics going on back here. So the first thing you'll see is you've got the windshield has got these scoops down here at the bottom. How does Ford do that? Well, once again, it's carbon fiber, so they can do whatever they want to. But this is basically channeling air into the transmission coolers inside the back of the vehicle. And you might be thinking, okay, well, the air comes in, where does the air go after it's gone through the transmission coolers and things like that? Well, it actually gets expended out on the side of the GTD logo on either side. So these mesh grills, basically air flows in here and out here. And I think it does a great job of creating a cool area on back here. Once again, this is just a talking point, but it's also functional. There's not a whole lot that's practical about this car. Everything is about the function. So we've established this wing creates a crap ton of downforce. And I want to take a second and talk about that for a second, because if you just hooked this normal wing up to a normal Mustang rear end, it would absolutely crush the entire back, the back pillar of the car. And so what Multimatic and Ford has done is when they ship the whole frame of the vehicle, what they did is they've actually cut the normal unibody, and you can see that with that seam that's located right there. And from everything back, the whole car is completely different, especially when it comes to the old substructure of the vehicle. So what's basically going on is the mounting point for this rear wing is not on the visible body, but it's actually going down deep into the substructure. So this wing is actually frame mounted, which I think is so cool. And what you may not realize as well is there's hydraulics that are built into this neck right here that allows for basically the pulling of the pulling motion with the hydraulics is what causes this wing to open up. And so this is actually in its natural state because when it's going to be open, it's got hydraulics pulling it in. So I think it's kind of neat, if you will. But I say all of that to say this, is the entire back end of this vehicle is completely Multimatic. With one small exception. There's a tiny little piece of metal underneath this tech deck that basically is a little piece of substructure. And if it looks like there's some pieces that are missing, that's because they are, because that is actually stamped out of a normal Mustang. But once again, I digress. But everything back here is completely new with the exception of the taillights. The taillights are in the same factory location as a normal Mustang. And I think that's so cool because they did that purely to save money on the research and development and actually getting things approved through the crash test rating and making sure that everything works and all of that kind of stuff. Also, I want to point out to you this tech deck, the reason we call it a tech deck is because this is a technical panel. There is no trunk back here, and that is a key point to this vehicle. What do I mean by that? Well, there is no trunk. And you'll notice how wide this car is. This car is wider than the Ford GT. In fact, it's 3 inches wider than our Ford GT. And that car was already wide. And so technically speaking, this car should be having those 3 amber logos or those 3 amber lights on the back of the vehicle that signify this is a work vehicle and it's wider than a normal vehicle. But did you realize that the reason Ford was able to get rid of that exclusion, because they thought, okay, these 3 amber lights, that's gonna look ugly on a car like this. Now it looks great on a Raptor, looks great on a dually, Super Duty, but it doesn't look good on a Mustang GTD. So how did they get around that? Well, because this vehicle has no storage space, literally, no trunk space, there's no back seat, they were able to find a loophole that this car, it cannot be used for any type of business purposes. No way, no how. And that's how they were able to keep those orange lights off of it, is because they were able to prove that this is going to be a personal consumption use only. It's a little loophole that Ford lawyers were able to work out. And I think it's such a cool little, if you're a Doug DeMuro fan, a quirk or a feature about this particular car. But moving on down even lower on the backside, you've got your reverse lighting system right here, and you've also got your entire carbon fiber rear diffuser. Now there is a diffuser going on here, but it's not nearly as aggressive as the 2021 Ford GT that we have in here. But it is exposed carbon fiber, and you can see the chevron that runs all the way down. Once again, kind of tying in with the theme that everything here is real carbon fiber, except for a couple of small pieces. You're gonna wanna hang on to the video so I can show those to you as well. Now we've moved inside because it's raining outside, so bear with me, but I wanna cover one of the most misconceptions about the entire Mustang GTD, and that is the engine. So first off, we're gonna hit the push pins here and push pins here, and you'll wanna be careful because everything is carbon fiber, and then there's a traditional Mustang latch located just like all the other Mustangs. Now from here, there's gonna be another latch, so you technically have got 4 buttons you have to hit in sequence to open up the hood, but thankfully, they gave us hood struts. I know Ford sometimes does not give you hood struts, but it's nice to see that we have it here. All right, so a couple of fun facts for you, things you've never seen on the internet anywhere about this car. There's a lot going on underneath here. Now, before we jump into those nuances, let's talk about the bones of what we're working with here. 5.2 supercharged V8, 815 horsepower. Those are the specs that are all over the internet. What most people are not talking about though is how do they accomplish that extra horsepower compared to the GT500 and the Raptor R, because that's really where this engine design came from, is those 2 vehicles. Well, first off, they've got a cam inside of here that is designed for high revving, ultra high horsepower. In addition to that, they've also got a smaller supercharger pulley, so it creates more boost when you are driving aggressive. And in addition to that, I will say, and I can confirm, that this car does have a lot more supercharger whine than a normal Shelby GT500, which is a good thing. I love it. Now, some people argue that the supercharger whine is a sign of inefficiency. I just see it as a sign of a good time. So anyways, let's talk about a little bit more about what we got going on. This is going to be something that nobody really wants to talk about, but I'm going to. These are your coolant reservoirs on my Mustang GTD. It's not the coolant reservoirs for everybody's Ford Mustang GTD. What do I mean by that? Well, if you want to know, hey, is this car an early production build or is it later on in the production build? Well, if you see the CNC billet aluminum coolant reservoir, that is a telltale sign. This is one of the very first vehicles that they ever produced, because the goal here is to eventually get a stamp or a mold for a coolant reservoir made out of plastic, because we're talking many thousands of dollars to have a CNC billet machined aluminum coolant reservoir. It's extremely expensive to produce that. And so if Ford can swap that over to a plastic one and not affect the performance at all, which is definitely doable, why not save that money? And instead of it being a profitable vehicle, it's a little bit more of a profitable vehicle for the motor company. So that is a fun fact for you, is that not every single GTD will have that billet. I do believe that these early cars will be more desirable with collectors later on if you've got that billet machined aluminum, because there's not nearly very many Mustang GTDs being built, and there's even fewer that are going to have this built in here as well. Now, a couple of other things that we're going to talk about. You've got 2 air intakes on this car. It's pretty wild. So most people know this, and this is kind of reminiscent of the GT500. You have this massive intake right here that actually feeds the air intake box. But what they did is they realized that's not enough air for this engine now that we've got a more aggressive supercharger pulley and we got the bigger cam and all that kind of stuff. So there's actually a secondary intake located right here. So you've actually got two intakes, one here and one here, that is completely different from a normal GT500. I think that's kind of cool. Now, back up to here, I'm gonna show you a couple of other things you've never, oh, I about fell on the Ford GT, that would have been bad. But there's a couple things that are carry over from GT500. Like take a look at this, carbon fiber composite. You can actually see that substructure is also made with that stuff. Now, earlier on in the video, if you were listening carefully, you'll notice we talked a body in black. That is the reason that every one of these vehicles underneath the hood is gonna be black in color. It's because it's easier to hide things. If it was a body in white, you'd have white right here and blue. That might not work with your theme, but having black definitely blends in a whole lot better. The strut tower brace is a direct carryover from the Shelby GT500, and it is magnesium, which is interesting. They can build that in magnesium, but they couldn't get the magnesium wheels. Once again, I'm not trying to just take a dump on Ford, but it would have been awesome if we could have gotten some magnesium wheels on it. But I am still super, super pumped to have the car in general, even if it meant I couldn't have the magnesium wheels. Now, I want to show you another fun fact for you. Okay. Now, I'm not going to shut the hood all the way, but I am going to shut the hood a little bit, and I want to show you, make a point. All right, so you can see these massive vents right here, these massive holes inside of the vehicle. Now, there is, especially when you're tracking the vehicle, you're actually supposed to take these out because it does increase the airflow, let more air out of underneath the engine. But there's one key component underneath this that would stick out like a green hat with an orange bill. Take a look at this. This says GTD, so you have GTD windshield wiper fluid. Now this is the exact same location as a normal Mustang. But in a normal Mustang, it's some bright blue, I think it is. And the engineers were looking at this and said, okay, we're at the track day and you've got this big bright blue thing. So they swapped that out simply because of the color. They needed something a little more low key since there's a massive hole underneath the hood. But because they spent the money to re-engineer a piece of plastic right here for the looks, it meant that they didn't have enough money for the next piece. Take a look at this. This is a piece of plastic shroud where a normal Mustang would have their battery would be located underneath here. And because of that, they've got a battery logo right here. Now, they said, okay, we can either have enough money to do this piece or this piece, but not both. So they chose the GTD windshield wiper fluid over the battery shroud. Why do I say that? Well, because the battery's not here. It's actually in the back area underneath the tech deck. So you've got a pretty interesting scenario there but you know what? I don't want to have to open up the tech deck every single time I need to throw the vehicle on the charger, because quite frankly, it's a lithium ion battery and you can't leave it unplugged for long periods of time, really more than 24, 48 hours. So how do you charge it and keep it charged pretty easily? Well, you've got this area right underneath here, and I want to make sure that I don't, because it's been a minute since I've taken this piece off, and I also don't want to burn myself. There we go. So this piece of plastic comes up, and basically this is your fuse box panel, if you will. Now under here, you've actually got the positive terminal located right here, and you've got your negative terminal located right in here. So you basically hook up your battery tender right here underneath the hood, even though the battery is in the back of the vehicle where the trunk area normally is. Fun fact for you, and one of the ways they were able to hit that 50-50 weight distribution for going around the Nürburgring as fast as possible. One last major feature underneath the hood, maybe it's not a feature, it might be a hindrance, but it's something you're not going to find anywhere else online. And so that's why I'm so excited to bring this video to you, to get a perspective as an owner and also a dealer that can point out things on this car that the reviewers are normally not going to talk about. That's these two pieces of plastic right here. Now, this is not going to be included on any other vehicle in Ford's lineup. Not in the Raptor R, not in the GT500, both of which share the same engine. Why in the world do these two pieces of plastic exist? Well, let's talk about this. So you'll notice that you have your air intake box right here, and then you have a hose that is basically funneling air to this little component. And then if you follow it all the way down, you'll notice that Ford Motor Company, for some reason, is funneling air from the air intake box directly into the exhaust manifold. What? Why in the world would they do that? Emissions. Unfortunately, because Ford Motor Company is got to abide by the emissions laws that are on the books, they have to find ways to make sure this vehicle can pass those emissions tests. And this goes back to something we talked about earlier, which was the camshaft in the vehicle. I mentioned to you the camshaft in this vehicle is designed for high horsepower at high revs. But unfortunately, that means at low RPM, the vehicle runs very, very rich, which means that the catalytic converters are not going to detonate and actually burn off the particulates to make sure that this vehicle fits the emission standards that are out on the books. So all of this to say is this vehicle is feeding air directly from the air intake directly into the catalytic converter just to pass emissions. And there's a whole bunch of R&D that has to go into that too. So that makes me wonder, how much more horsepower is this vehicle capable with if you didn't have to fool with that? Before we shut the hood though, I want to show you one other feature underneath the hood, because there's a lot going on underneath here. These are those mesh vents that I showed you on the top side of the hood. And you'll notice this is just an Allen wrench will be able to pull all of these out. But the problem is that if you were just to pull these out, those bolts would fall out and they would fall down and never to be seen again. You know, I mean, that's an unfortunate reality. But what Ford did is they realized, okay, if you're going to take this thing to the track, you need to pull these vents out. Why? Because it lets more air flow out of the engine bay, which will allow it to cool off a lot faster, also helps with the aerodynamics. So Ford has thought this through, and they basically have given us these bolts. When you back them out, you turn them 3 turns, and they actually stay with the mesh. And so you don't have to worry about dropping those bolts down into the engine bay, never to be seen again. So once again, just hit each one of these bolts, it comes out in one big piece, and you never have to worry about losing the bolts on the mesh. So I think that's kind of cool. The other thing is this is a carbon fiber hood. Don't do what I did the very first thing and just go slamming the hood. I don't know if there's any footage of me doing that, but the delivery specialist very nicely pointed out that's not how you want to shut the hood. Instead, what you want to do is come to about right here, and right in the center, you want to kind of follow the hood down like that. You don't want to slam it because carbon fiber can crack and splinter, no bueno. Then the last thing you want to do is make sure that those hood pins are fully engaged. Now that we're on the inside of the vehicle, you've got some really decent amenities. This is probably the part of the car that gets hated on the most. And first thing I want to do is I want to turn on the instrument cluster. And to do that, Ford has given us a really nice key, and it looks just like this. This is unlock, lock, remote start, and you have the trunk release for the tech deck. And then you also have the panic. But on the back of the key, yep, just a normal Mustang. I'm embarrassed to kind of tell you the MSRP of this car, but it's coming a little bit later in this video. But at least they could have given us a backing to the key that says GTD, kind of like our Ford GT, at least has the GT logo. But this probably would have cost 20 bucks extra. I wish they would have done that. A little bit different, but we're here now. So we're gonna hit the magnificent red start-stop button, and everything comes to light. You have all of the animations, everything is basically customized around the GTD, and so it's nice that they give us those animations. And I will say that I am gonna turn this air conditioner down a little bit. Sorry about that. So the inside of the vehicle does have real carbon fiber everywhere that you see right in here. So this is not fake carbon fiber. You've got this is real carbon fiber. And while we're here, take a look at our serial number. S stands for a 2025 model, and this is number 126, VIN number 126. Ford is not building these in sequential order. So they're not building number 1 and then building number 2 and then building number 3. Everybody gets their VIN, and then they just build them whenever they can with the parts that they've got coming in at that time. So even though we're serial number 126, we're actually, I think, the 90th delivery across the whole country, which is kind of cool. But I want to show you a couple of other things. You have carbon fiber around the steering wheel. The steering wheel is completely different. I'm so glad for that. You've got this really nice leather, and then you've also got an Alcantara in the inside of it, so that way your thumbs have got something nice to grip onto, but the palm of your hand has got something nice and smooth in case you have to let the wheels spin inside of your hand. I think that's really, really nice. But there is something that most people are not talking about. There's real carbon fiber throughout this entire car, except for a couple of places. Take a look at this. This area right in here, you might be thinking, man, that's blasphemy. I can't believe you'd spend that much on a Mustang and they gave you fake carbon fiber. Well, there's actually a reason behind it. So I'm not just absolutely dogging on Ford for this, but carbon fiber has got minimum tolerances where it has to be like a certain size, it has to be a certain thickness. Otherwise, it's going to be brittle and it'll fall apart on you. And that's the reason that on these intricate panels, they had to do a faux fiber look to it, faux carbon fiber. The same thing with these panels inside of the door themselves. Because this has got the speakers for the door built into it, they couldn't make it real carbon fiber because those tiny little holes would have basically caused the carbon fiber to fail. So a fun fact for you. Now let's talk about a cool couple of features built into this instrument cluster and the infotainment system that are specific to the GTD. Now, coming in here, you've got a couple of buttons. I'm gonna hit the My Pony button, so that way you can come in here and you can see track apps, auxiliary gauges, all that kind of stuff. I wanna go into the cluster theme, and you can see that you've got all different options. You can match your drive mode, you can go into normal, you can go into all of these different menus, but here's one thing I want to point out to you is look at the miles that they've given you, 1964 and a half. An homage to the fact that this car, the Mustang, debuted as a 1964 and a half model year. I think that's so cool. But it is important to notice that you have got a couple of screens out of here that are missing. So like a normal S650, you've got the ability to do the Fox body style gauges, but I don't see that as an option in here. Same thing goes for the 03, 04 Cobra. You had that year model instrument cluster is available on the S650, but it's not available in the GTD. So just kind of giving you a heads up there. The other thing I want to point out to you is you have remote start, but this car does not have remote rev. So a normal S650 Mustang has the ability to rev it up right here from the key fob, which is great for cars and coffee, but it's not available on the Mustang GTD, I guess because it's got its own custom tuning from the ground up with Ford Motor Company. Now I want to talk about another thing that I think is so unique and nobody else is talking about this, variable traction control. All right, so let's talk about this. I'm going to go back to the home menu just so that looks normal. Now I want to come over here into the drive modes, and I want to go from normal or sport or whatever it is that I'm in right now. And I want to drop it down into track mode. Now, if the vehicle is running, it would automatically lower the vehicle by 50 millimeters, but since I don't have it running, I have it running off of just the battery, the suspension stayed the same. But that's not what I wanted to point out to you. Now, first thing I wanted to point out to you is you have the active aero or the DRS system. That light is basically telling you that it's on. If you wanted to turn that off, I can come back into the track apps and I can turn the active aero off, which basically means that I'm going to be maximum downforce no matter how fast I'm driving. And you'll notice that it turned that light off as well. But if I'm really going to be racing around a track and I need to make sure my top speed is as fast as it possibly can, I'm going to turn that active aero on and it will automatically go into slippery mode over 35 miles an hour and it will disengage at 25 miles an hour. So that's kind of something there. Line lock and latch control, both of those features are available just like they are on an S650. Unfortunately, line lock is still blacked out for me right now because I just took delivery of the car yesterday and you can't drive the vehicle until PPF is on it. And so I've got 30 days to wait until I can get PPF on it until I can actually start driving the thing. So that's why we're making the content like we're making it right now. But that's not even what I wanted to point out to you. The variable traction control, this is so cool. So once you have it in traction control, or track mode rather, then you come in here and you want to hit the traction control mode. When you do that, it actually gives you variable traction control and you can adjust how much traction control you want. So if you're a newbie or you're not comfortable with the car or you just got in it and I need to know what can the car actually do, you would leave it on maximum traction control. You say, you know what, I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable. I'm gonna turn that traction control down just a little bit by adjusting the set button over here because they know that if you're in track mode, you're guaranteed not gonna be using cruise control, so these buttons are useless unless you've got variable traction control. Now, I'm gonna turn it down a little bit more because I'm feeling froggy. You know what? I'm feeling even better. And then it keeps going all the way down to where you can turn the variable traction control all the way off. But from what I've been told is that this variable traction control is very good. And you really don't want to push it in a car that's this expensive, because if you make a mistake and you don't have track day insurance, you're up a creek. I can tell you that right now. So my guess is I'm going to start here, and the better I get at driving the car, the more I'm going to turn that traction control down to have a little bit more party. But there's even more benefit to it than that. Let's just say you're driving the car, you're driving it hard, long period of time, and the tires start to wear down. Well, you can actually turn the traction control up a little bit to compensate for some tires that are not doing as good as when they were brand new on the car. So I think that's even a cool side benefit. Even if you are an extremely experienced driver, that's what that is. You'll also notice that you've even got a blue icon right here indicating that the transmission, the gears and the fluid inside of it is still cold. You might need to just chill out before you start beating on the car. Once again, the car's not even running, so that's the reason that is the case for this one. But all in all, I'm really, really pleased with everything on the inside. It really feels like, I know this is where most people bash in the GTD, but it feels like they spent all of their money on the engineering and development on the outside of the car, where it really matters the most. And quite frankly, that's what I would want out of a car like this. I'm just super glad that being 6'3", I can actually fit in this car, and I could drive this hundreds and hundreds of miles and not get wore out. I've got such a long torso, and to fit in that tiny little Ford GT next to us, I had to scoop my butt all the way down to the edge of the seat to drive, just to be able to clear the roof line. And the problem with that is I've actually got a slip disc in my back. And so after 10 miles, I'm over here hurting. I'm hobbling every time I get out of the car. Well, because this is built on a normal Mustang, I can actually sit comfortably with plenty of headroom in the vehicle for the first time in a long time in a Multimatic vehicle. So I'm really, really excited about that. Not to mention that these seats, they are manually adjusting, right? To save weight, okay? So they're not power adjusted seats, but that's okay. The frame of these seats come out of a GT 500, the Recaro seats, but they are completely re-upholstered and re-bolstered specifically to the Mustang GTD. I can actually tell as a big boy, they are bolstered. I'm not gonna slide anywhere, but I'm actually comfortable driving the vehicle. The seats are not cutting into my love handles being 6'3" and 270 pounds. So I think Ford did a really, really good job on hitting the inside and spending the money on the outside. Now let's take a look at the back seat of the Mustang GTD, or where a back seat used to be on a normal S650 Mustang. You'll see, obviously, it's got a rear seat delete, and you've got some kind of a composite here. Speaking of this, you'll notice it's covered in carpet. Because we have the performance package, this car has the lightweight carpet on the inside, which I think is kind of fun. But you know, I said earlier that there's no storage in this vehicle. There actually is. It's actually located right here. And you've even got some tie-down points, if I can get my fat fingers underneath them, so that way you can hook your tiny little piece of luggage and actually strap it down so that way it doesn't slide all over there and, you know, hit you in the back of the head when you slam on the brakes. But the most notable feature of the whole Mustang GTD is that rear window right there. This is such a cool feature because you get to see what is going on in the back suspension of the Mustang GTD. Why is that? Well, as I remind you, you have an engine in the front, you have a drive shaft, carbon fiber drive shaft that runs out to the back into a rear mounted transmission, which technically is called a transaxle. And because of that, there's really no space to put the struts in a traditional format. So what do? They have a cantilever rear suspension system. And it was so cool that during development, Jim Farley said, no, we got to be able to see that. And next thing you know, the Mustang GTD is coming with a rear window in the back. But there's one drastic downside that nobody else is going to talk to you about. And that is, what does that rear window do to you on the noise, vibration, and harshness of the car? Let me explain what I'm talking about. When you have a very high horsepower engine up front, 815 horsepower, you know, you've got a firewall. No, that's not what we're supposed to call them anymore, but the firewall basically separates the engine bay from the cabin of the vehicle. And there's some sound deadening in there to basically reduce the vibrations and the harshness of that engine. But take a look at this. The engine from time to time can create a tiny little vibration. Not a big deal, right? Normally you would never notice it. But because that vehicle has got a carbon fiber drive shaft that runs to the back, and then you've got the transmission in the rear, and there is a plexiglass piece of window back here, there is no way to deaden the sound because you can actually see through it. And so from time to time, the engine in this 5.2 can actually create a tiny little vibration that gets sent to the back and can actually amplify it into the vehicle from time to time. Now, I have not actually experienced this, but there are some other GTD owners that have. My car's been fine, but from time to time, if you drive a Mustang GTD, you might get some weird transmission sounds that are not transmission sounds at all. It's actually the vibrations that are normal out of the front engine that are basically just relayed to the back and then amplified to the front because there is a plexiglass window. But I'm gonna tell you right now, even if my car rattles like crazy, which it doesn't, but even if it does, that is an awesome trade-off because that is the coolest party trick I have ever seen. Now let's give you another look at what it looks like to actually purchase one of these. Every single time you buy a Mustang GTD, you get one of these packets. And I'm gonna break it down and show you what you get inside of it. So the first thing is you got a folder inside of a folder. And a fun fact for you, this is the delivery paperwork that we received with all of the fun details. Just once again, a collector might want to see that one day. There's no reason to pay a whole lot of attention to that. This is where the party happens. Beautiful GTD folder, if you will. And on the inside, let's cover this one first. This has got all of the different photos of the car during its production. And I think this is such a cool touch that you actually get to see this. We have the same thing on our Ford GT behind us, and I think this is such a neat little touch that it even shows you your VIN number in the photos and a lot of those different photos. The next part of the packet, which we're gonna cover the window sticker in just a second, but the next part of the packet is all of the legal disclosure stickers that have to go on every single one of these vehicles. Well, thankfully Ford and Multimatic does not actually put these on the window. They ship them in this packet. So I think that's kind of neat, but shows that it's special order. It's got the VIN number and all that stuff. But this is probably why you've made it so long into this video. And you might have noticed that Ford Motor Company has talked a lot about the starting MSRP of this car, $325,000. What most people don't realize is that you have to pay extra for any of the options that you want to have added. For instance, you can add a extended palette. You can pay extra to have any color under the rainbow painted on this vehicle, with the exception of Mr. Chrome. You can't have Mr. Chrome, unfortunately. But every other color is on the table. And you know, things like that. You have titanium shifter. You have titanium paddles, which we did not opt for because they were expensive. I'm not going to get into the individual pricing on each of those different options because at the end of the day, as far as I'm sitting here, the 25 and 26 are already sold, and the 26s are probably going to have a price increase if I had to guess. But let me show you the window sticker to my vehicle. Take a look at the, yes, we are a little bit brain damaged. $432,000. We can go ahead and round up and call that $433,000 for a Mustang. It's a lot of money, but hopefully what you have seen in this video is the same thing that I feel is that this car is absolutely worth every single one of those pennies, because at the end of the day, they're all hand built with photos. It's all hand laid carbon fiber. It's all transmission mounted in the rear, carbon fiber drive. The technology inside of this car, quite frankly, I know the ZR1 was a little bit faster than the GTD around the Nürburgring, and I don't care. I think this is more or less a piece of art that is also stupid fast and is going to be a good driver, even though I haven't had a chance to drive this one yet because of the PPF. But quite frankly, I think it's an awesome car. And look at this, you get 10 smiles per gallon. So, you know, 10 miles a gallon is 17 on the highway. At the end of the day, if this car shows anything other than single-digit fuel economy, we're driving it wrong. But I think this is such a cool vehicle, and I'm so honored to every single one of you that is watching our videos, because if it wasn't for you, we would not be able to have a car like this. Number one, couldn't afford it. Number two, Ford Motor Company wouldn't have selected us. And so I'm so honored that you're watching this video right now. I'm so honored that you hit the like button. And I'm so honored that you're a part of the tribe of over 300,000 people that are watching our videos as subscribers. And so thank you for all of those things. But I also want to say thank you to Ford Motor Company, because someone at Ford Motor Company thought of us as worthy enough to have one of these cars. Maybe it's because we have our Ford GT and we never sold it. Whereas a lot of dealers out there took it, and the second that they could, they flipped it for a profit. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to show off both of these cars because at the end of the day, I think this is a marvel that Ford has been able to engineer stuff like this, and they're able to produce stuff like this. And quite frankly, it's just an honor to be able to share a car like this with the world. So if you want to see more content about this Mustang GTD, especially once we get a PPF and can start driving it and driving it hard, make sure you're subscribed to the channel with the bell notification turned on so you don't miss a single one of those videos. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day. Peace.